Hey everyone, welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive Show, episode number 31 of the show, the newsletter, and arguably the greatest tech podcast in the whole entire world. This week, we are talking about AI innovations transforming industries, such as OpenAI's Realtime API and the year of NFX efficiency continues. As a reminder, this show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcast. You can subscribe to the newsletter on LinkedIn and check us out on YouTube. If you're interested in being social with me, you can find me at Read Daily on LinkedIn, X, and Threads. You can also check out the show Digital 3D Show on X, IG, and Threads as well. All right, with all that out of the way, let's jump into the global tech news headlines. So about a week and a half ago, OpenAI had their development day, and they unveiled new tools for developers called the Realtime API. And this API will allow developers to create speech-to-text or speech-to-speech applications in near real time, opening up new possibilities for voice-driven interfaces. And when I read this, obviously last year they had the issue with Scarlett Johansson and kind of cloning her voice. And I went a totally different direction with my kind of takeaway on this. Call centers are on the verge of significant change driven by advances in AI. At OpenAI's event, the real-time API was unveiled, and you could basically seamlessly, near instantaneous conversations between AI and customers. This innovation can obviously automate FAQs, handle simple troubleshooting, do some advanced customer experience by speeding up response times and doing call deflection. But I think where you're going to see a huge lift is if the AI can take who's speaking and whoever the customer is and use the agent's voice, have it translated through some AI, and then sort of the other end, if you will, comes out and the consumer hears it in sort of their native accent or language. And so you could basically have, folks living in another country with, a lower cost to employ. They could be potentially speaking in their native language and or whatever I live in the States, so let's just say English. And if they have a heavy accent, it could be translated from that heavy accent into, an American accent from the Northeast or down South or Midwest, et cetera, et cetera. Additionally, one of the other things came in was pretty game-changing for OpenAI and from their cost centers. They think that they've got costs down by about 1,000x and making it more affordable for call centers of all sizes to use some of their models. And I think they've been really talking about, how can they decide to switch out which models to use based on, the query and kind of what's being asked and how complex it is, because certain of their models take up more energy and compute, which is, obviously impacts to, the world at large in terms of energy consumption. The second story I thought was interesting. It was one on a VC firm called NFX, and they laid off 4 employees and plan to hire more investors. And there's not a huge amount of people. I just thought this was interesting that, one, this got buzz, and kind of two, deconstructing it. So NFX builds and runs its own internal software to find and evaluate companies. The firm has recently found it can use AI to do the same level of output with fewer people. Big surprise. Flint, the firm's product and engineering team, Flint, who's the lead over there, said that the firm's product and engineering team remain large and that the firm's investing team wasn't affected. I can't recall if it was, are we in the year of efficiency or was last year the year of efficiency by X and Meta. But the fact that organizations are changing their org and operating model is super interesting to me, based on the fact that you can do more with AI with less people. And what's really kind of cool is, how they're sort of redeploying their capital for all intents and purposes. And it looks like they're doing less on the engineering, but more on the deal team. And my guess is that over time you're going to have these proprietary models that funds, VCs, financial sponsors, due diligence providers both have in terms of like it becomes their secret sauce and they can sort of look at different ways to slice companies from a financial lens, from basically what's going on in the economics, macroeconomic trends, and how that could have positive or negative impacts on the business and the business valuation over a certain time horizon. So I expect to see more and more of these proprietary models being created by funds, and it will be interesting to see how that's industry or subsector of financial sponsors evolves and using human capital or human in the loop with these AI models. The next up is also talking about AI, and it's Unify, which is an AI powered startup that uses data to reach prospective buyers. And this is something I've been just very interested in learning more about and kind of spending more time around. So, Unify is an AI powered startup that uses data to reach prospective buyers. Not a huge aha moment there, but they've raised 12 million in Series A while working at Ramp, which was the previous company. The founder Hughes observed that cold email outreach was less successful than it had been in past decades, and this gave him the idea that sales, marketing, and revenue operations teams should make better use of available data to reach customers with personalized content right when they're about to buy. And so, just anecdotally, you've got every one of these sort of software companies that provide information about a customer in terms of their like LinkedIn, email and phone number. They're also trying to sell you surge data, and you can't do it on the individual because of like privacy, but you can do it on their company. And so if Unify has the ability to pull data from CRM and other data warehouses to help you craft unique messages to buyers based on where they are in their journey and their relationship with your organization. This is something that I personally am increasingly interested in as someone who sends out a ton of outbound emails and recognizes the fact that having those tailored to your needs is critical. So this is moving back past like, hey, Bob, I know you went to insert college X. This is like, hey, Bob, I know you're, in your, second sort of round of demos in this specific area and you're considering these different tools, or you have this sort of like disposition. Here's some more information to help you in your buying journey. That's just an example, obviously. But another one is a friend of mine is doing something where they actually are pulling all this data for a person on their personal and professional and putting in a data warehouse. And they're basically warming them up. So if they see you're surging on something, rather than just messaging you right away and saying like kind of buy, they're saying, hey, like you have no idea who we are. So we're going to warm you up through banner ads, social ads, and email ads for like 3 weeks. And then when you start to do the drip campaign, someone already knows who you are and a little more about your company. So there's going to be a lot of ways to skin this cat. Unify, I haven't looked at the solution, but I plan to spend some time, evaluating their capabilities, and I'll report back from my findings. The next one up is something that I thought was really simple, I think in theory, but I thought had an immense instant lift and has the potential for more features and capabilities down the road. So the research and insights platform, CB Insights, launched a GPT capability, and essentially that what they've done is thrown an LLM on top of their research, and then you can do sort of a summary at the company level and a couple sort of subsections. But it will be interesting to see that if you could either within their system, use different prompting, or if you can integrate through an API to their system and pull it into like a data lake on your own side, you match up that with CRM data on an individual or a company, and you're really starting to, cook with fire, cook with gas, I think is the analogy. But Yeah, it was cool to see. I've used it a few times, and in terms of just the ability to use CB Insights in a more accelerated or digestible manner, it made it super easy for me to go in, look at a company, extract kind of some data and share that with my team or just process it. And so more and more of these research tools are clearly going to, add these GPT capabilities on top. I'd love to see when like a company like Hoover's or Gartner really gets this working at scale, because I think it will make both of those tools even more usable than they already are. Um, Lina Khan on Prof G. So, full disclosure, I have not listened to this episode, but I'm very excited about it. So, if you are in the world of podcasting or in the world of sort of tech and strategy, you've probably heard of Scott Galloway, and I'm going to call him a sidekick, Ed Elson. And they've got two podcasts. One's Prof G, and then the other one is that sort of launched recently, was the Prof G Markets. And they had Lina Khan on, who is the chair of the Federal Trade Commission, to discuss the needs for regulations in big tech, and then the connection between inflation and industry concentration. She kind of breaks down how the FTC analyzes mergers and acquisitions and explains how the FTC measures consumer harms. This is a huge win for Scott and Ed to have her on. I'm looking forward to walking my boy Blue this weekend and having a listen to this. I don't care where you stand in terms of wanting more regulation or less. It's just interesting to hear the framework that she being Lina Khan, use, her and her team use to measure and sort of figure out where to target or not target organizations due to monopolies and mergers. So that wraps it up for kind of the global news. Let's go into content deconstructed. So obviously I make this show. It's a video podcast now. We have the newsletter, and we're doing a ton with YouTube Shorts just because I see that as the best performing digital asset on the web. The second most, I haven't done a ton with Instagram Reels, but LinkedIn newsletter does a great job too. And, just trying to get up my game on the video podcast. You'll see that I got a new microphone. I bought the really expensive one and it was too much of a pain. So I got the new MV7 Plus from Shure. Shameless plug, but hey, Shure, sponsor the podcast. And it's USB-C, so it connects directly into my iPad Air, and it works great. So, what I wanted to do is just figure out like what's going on with videos and video podcasting. And so Spotify actually came out with a great study this year that runs through sort of the popularity of video podcasting is increasing. They highlighted that 40% of Spotify users who stream a new show opted for the video podcast, which is really a big number and significant to me because we've moved way past the COVID era. So people are back sort of traveling, but probably not traveling as much. And, they're consuming a ton of video. And the fact that they're getting it from Spotify is super interesting. My guess is big hitters are the Joe Rogan podcast and Until She Left, Call Her Daddy to go to, Sirius. But, that it is growing and, 40% is a big number. In terms of video podcast to improve audience retention, listeners are 1.3 times more likely to continue listening to a video podcast than an audio-only podcast. And, while that is kind of interesting to me, I don't know if it's like a materially, significant number. But the second piece is interesting, is that the trend is especially notable for smaller shows, which experienced a 26% increase in listener retention when video was used. So we'll see that if using video on this podcast helps increase audience engagement and repeat listeners as well as new listeners. Then if we look, in terms of video podcast offering flexibility in consumption, this was kind of interesting. So while over 70% of viewers watched video podcasts in the foreground, 67% of Spotify users switch between watching and listening throughout the day. So that means they're likely like consuming it before they go to school or work on video, and then they're kind of on the go, so they switch to audio. So it means that in my mind, that podcasts are consistently still a longer form content, and that consumers are kind of taking it and consuming it over time throughout their day, throughout their week. In terms of connecting online and in real life, I'm recording this Wednesday evening, and I had my first executive briefing series where I was the host, if you will. We covered the cannabis industry risks and opportunities, and you're probably wondering why we're talking about cannabis on a technology podcast. Well, over the last 5 years, I've been involved in and around the cannabis space, not a ton, but enough. We've done a number of diligence on the tech and ops side, as well as looking at software solutions for POS and customer management. And so I've really enjoyed what I will call manufacturing and retail adjacent. I mean, it's a manufacturing industry with regulatory apparatus for track and trace, as they call seed to sale. And so during the conversation, we talked about, essentially all the risks and opportunities in the space. What I'll be doing is sharing the 5 key takeaways from that conversation, and looking forward to hosting more executive briefing series. It took a lot to prep for that and execute it, and I really enjoyed that process. Next up, we've got the 25th annual Midwest Capital Connect. So if you are in Chicago or coming to Chicago, it is the premier networking and deal review conference. There's going to be over 100 investment banks, and there's going to be the opportunity to do what I'll call, deal review or speed dating. And you'll also have obviously tons of networking opportunities. So looking forward for everyone who is coming in town for that at the end of October. And for those that live here, looking forward to connecting. Haven't seen a lot of people in a long time, been on the road a fair bit. So that one's going to be a good one. Getting back on the road, be in Boston for Venture East 2024 through Built Worlds. This is November 6th through 7th. And so we're going to be talking to a lot of venture capitalists and understanding what's moving the needle in and around construction tech, talking to, capital allocators as well as newer startups, and also exploring how some of these new capabilities can fit inside a larger digital transformation apparatus from our advisory group. Last on the events that I've got listed thus far for the next couple of weeks. I've got the Fall M&D Symposium coming up. That's in Chicago. That will be on November 13th. That's an ACG event. So if you are in and around the M&D space, highly recommend you checking that one out. All right. That wraps it up for this week's episode of the Digital Deep Dive Show. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you like the video format. I'd like to say it takes a lot more prep, but now that I've got this new USB mic and the iPad, the only thing I have to do is find about 4 books to stack up underneath it, just so I can get the height of the camera right. But I'm enjoying doing the video. We'll get better over time with different angles of cameras, different lighting. But for now, this works just fine. Like I mentioned at the start of the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Reed Daily. You can also check me out on X and Threads. And you can check out this show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or whatever else you get your podcasts. We're, of course, on YouTube and YouTube Shorts. And a newsletter hits your inbox every time, as long as you subscribe, thanks to the good friends over at LinkedIn. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.